Welcome to the Andy Staples Show. It's another State of the Program edition, and this time we are focusing on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Audrey Snyder, the Athletics Penn State beat writer, joins us. Ari Wasserman, the Athletics recruiting guru, number one Domino's cheesy bread fan, and General Songbird, if you heard Monday's show. Is that the best intro I can give you, Ari?
Yes, but I want to add something to Audrey's intro. Fellow purveyor of the Filet-O-Fish sandwich on the show. I think Audrey's the first person that we've had on the show that agrees with me on the Filet-O-Fish, right?
Yeah, if we were to draft sandwiches again, there would be one person in this conversation who drafted the Filet-O-Fish. Andy, that person is not Ari Wasserman. Don't let him fool you.
So we did a sandwich draft with some of the other writers on staff during the pandemic because we were bored. And it was a sandwich draft. And I thought that I would be the only person that would take the Filet-O-Fish. So I waited to the late rounds to do it. And then Audrey like snatched it from me.
Yep.
Which is when I knew she knew what she was talking about. So she did draft the Filet-O-Fish ahead of me.
Whoa, no. Let's break this down.
Yeah.
You didn't love Filet-O-Fish enough.
That's
Ari.
what she says.
That's what it is.
And I do think that, like, now looking back at it, I probably should have just taken it number one to make the point that I was going to make. At the time, I was focused on winning the draft when I really should have just been winning the Filet-O-Fish, the admiration of the Filet-O-Fish from the people. And Audrey, I can't take that back. She snatched it from me.
He tried to trade me every sandwich he had, and I said, no, I don't want it. I wanted the Filet-O-Fish.
And then to overcompensate, I finished the last 3 rounds of my draft by drafting the double Filet-O-Fish, the triple Filet-O-Fish, and the quadruple Filet-O-Fish.
And Airland and Sea.
It didn't work because Audrey stole the heart right out of my chest. But I do want to know. I just want to say thank you, Audrey, for agreeing with me. Do you want to take 30 seconds to talk about why you like it?
I mean, to me, it's like one of those sandwiches that you grew up eating, right? Like every Catholic, every Friday during Lent, like that was one of those, right? Like your mom would take you to McDonald's and you get a Filet-O-Fish. Like that was just a big thing. And my friends, we still laugh about it. But like when we were in elementary school, my mom and two of my best friends, they're twins, their grandma, we'd go on Fridays to McDonald's after school and like, you got a Filet-O-Fish. Like it was just what you did. Like that was just normal behavior. So
that's
to me,
called a solid upbringing is what that is. That's what you see why Audrey's in the position that she's in professionally. It's no mistake.
So you're saying it's Protestantism that caused chicken McNuggets to be my favorite McDonald's menu item.
It's funny because if there is this weird religious correlation between the Filet-O-Fish and some people, and I'm not sure if that's what you're saying, Audrey, but people eat the Filet-O-Fish during Lent.
Yeah.
And the most ironic part about my introduction to the Filet-O-Fish is because my mother's from Israel and my grandmother was Israeli. So when she would come in from Israel to America and we'd go to McDonald's, like that was the only sandwich on the menu that she found was close enough to being deemed kosher because it has cheese and fish on it, and that's okay. And you can't have cheese and meat on it. So like there's a religious aspect to this to me as well. So maybe it's just like
for the same reasons that Ari.
I think it's possible.
We're building bridges with golden fried Filet-O-Fish.
I think what I'm trying to say is that it is the fish of the Lord.
I like that.
It is the sandwich of the Lord.
The Old Testament and the New Testament God love Filet-O-Fish.
The Book of Mormon. It doesn't matter what book you're in it. You're going to find the Filet-O-Fish in there somewhere.
This is
the Quran.
It's uniting people. I mean, I don't understand how they don't sponsor the show, Andy. I mean, I think you guys have given them enough publicity over the time.
If you talk out of the side of your mouth about the Filet-O-Fish, you are risking eternal damnation.
I like it. Yeah.
Watch this turn. Watch this turn. So if Ohio State is the Filet-O-Fish of the Big Ten, where does that leave Penn State? Where on the McDonald's menu does that? All right,
if we drafted McDonald's menu items, what would you draft number one?
Me?
Oof.
Yeah.
Chicken McNuggets.
Tells us a lot, doesn't it, Ari?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he tells me that I have the palate
of a 5-year-old. To make others suffer with my chicken McNugget farts. If you've never smelled a chicken McNugget fart, like the fart you let out after a 20-piece. So I had a 94 Toyota Corolla back in the day, cloth seats.
Okay.
That fart smell never leaves those seats.
A 94 Corolla. Wow.
Well, it was the 90s. So it wasn't
1994
that
Toyota
old at the
Corolla
time.
with cloth seats.
It was still the 90s when I had it. So, and it took me out of the 90s as well. But yes, that smell never comes out. And the Filet-O-Fish does not provide the right tone and timbre of fart sound.
When's the last time you had a Filet-O-Fish?
It's probably been 10 years.
Okay.
Ooh, 10
so
years.
This is exactly what Jimbo Fisher did to that reporter.
Your media, don't you do your research?
Your media, don't you do your research?
Wow.
10 years? I don't think you're qualified to discuss it, Andy.
Has James Franklin ever put you on the spot about your Filet-O-Fish love, Audrey?
He has not. No. Maybe this will start a conversation.
Well, you needed Penn State's offensive line coach, Phil Troutwine, who I covered when he was a Florida player and I was a Florida beat writer. Yeah. He doesn't look like he played offensive line. He looks like the mountain from Game of Thrones now. I don't think he's touched a Filet-O-Fish in a while either. So it's
next
how
time
it goes.
I see him, I'm going to ask him.
On our SEC road trip, you're going to eat one.
Okay, we can do that.
I just want you to eat it. You can only take one bite out of it, but you have to get a fresh one. And I think it's possible that you might be changing your mind.
I think you're wrong because I think you just like the things that you like because you like them for sentimental reasons and not for taste reasons.
It's not sentimental. It's delicious.
And I like things for taste reasons. Occasionally, I like them for sentimental reasons, but most of the time,
most people who eat the Filet-O-Fish after I tell them to eat it think it's a good sandwich.
It's an elite sandwich.
Nobody ever says, "Oh my God, that was gross."
I've eaten a lot of Filet-O-Fish, guys. I ate fast food pretty much every meal from birth until about age 30. So
it's evolved.
I've had plenty.
Do your research.
He is older than us, Ari. Remember, he had that 94 Corolla.
Yeah. I had classic Filet-O-Fish.
I'm just saying, you guys don't even know. You're the media, and you're putting stuff out there.
All right. Yeah,
you're the media.
Sliced fish on Bro Bible.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's talk Nittany Lions because this was an interesting offseason, Audrey, because James Franklin gets a big fat extension, presumably to keep him away from USC. Lincoln Riley ends up getting that job anyway. But James Riley, I've just combined the two of them. James Franklin.
James Riley would be a hell of a coach if you put both of them together.
Correct. Yes. But so he's got this big extension. It is 85% guaranteed. So James Franklin and Penn State are married for a long time now. Pat Kraft coming in as the AD, probably the most football-friendly AD Penn State's had in a long, long time. Yeah. It feels a little bit like a new era, but then not necessarily with the roster.
Yeah, it's weird because it feels like this is like a fresh start, but then you're like, oh yeah, the quarterback's back for his 6th year and he's going to be 24 in July. It's very weird. And, you look at it and they're going to be young at a lot of spots. But I think overall you look at this roster and you just say, well, okay, it's year 2 with Mike Yursich, an offense that underperformed last year. I mean, the thing that really strikes me, Andy, is that, the COVID year, like last year at this time, I was like, okay, 2020, it was an anomaly. The COVID year, they go 4-5, whatever, opt-outs, it makes sense. They had no spring ball. And then you watch last year, and now you're like, well, they're 11-11 going back to the start of 2020. And so then it's like, hey, 11-11. And yet Franklin gets that new 10-year contract, which, like you said, I mean, they're going to be married for a long time. Or you look at it, and the buyout figure, of course, is very lopsided in his direction. I think there is a possibility there in a few years that if things aren't going well, he would just buy himself out. Like I could see that happening if it gets to that point. But yeah, it feels like a reset, but also you're bringing back your quarterback for another go around. And most people are more interested in your 5-star freshman quarterback who you're probably not going to see this year in Drew Aller.
Was the contract extension just a reaction to what Michigan State did? And I'm trying to figure out which one was crazier.
They did it right before Mel Tucker. Like it was all that week of the Land-Grant game. Yeah. Because Penn State came out like a day or two before Mel Tucker.
Oh, I thought it came out after.
Same agent, because remember, Franklin switched to Jimmy Sexton. So
that's how it's connected.
It's the same agent doing the deal. So obviously they knew what was going on with Mel's deal when they were doing.
Okay, that's I remember it was connected somehow, and I'm just trying to figure out which one sounds crazier to you.
I mean, Yeah, the timing for both is pretty bad when you look at what happens, the next week with Michigan State. But for Penn State, I think you're saying, okay, you're 11-11 going back to the start of 2020. So why did you feel the need to do this now? And we had a chance to talk to Sandy Barber in the winter, who's since announced her retirement, and she said, like, yeah, we thought he's earned it, he deserved it. That's a really tough sell to a fan base when you're coming off of these last 2 seasons. I think she was kind of more into the earlier part of his tenure where Penn State goes to those 3 New Year's Six bowl games. But again, I think going back to the start of 2020, it looks very crazy when you kind of look at this contract.
I feel like they paid all that money, Andy, not to interrupt you, but I just my thought process was with both of these schools is I would rather pay $100 million over 10 years to not face a coaching search that we won't feel good about. Like, I felt like it was more to avoid being in a black hole of don't know who to get than it was a reward for the accomplishments of the past.
But here's the thing about Penn State and that. There are coaches out there who would take the Penn State job, who Penn State people would be happy with. But now, would they be available when that came up? If that came up in like 3-4 years, I don't know. So I'm with you there. The thing about this is you have Michigan getting over the hump against Ohio State, winning the Big Ten, and now it feels like it really does feel like there's 4 programs that are capable of winning the East and therefore winning the Big Ten. And because Ohio State got beat, they don't tower over everyone as much anymore. But it feels like the competition is even more fierce now. I mean, am I right there, Audrey?
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, you look at that Big Ten East, and the last 2 years, it's been a step back for Penn State. And you say, okay, well, you got to play Ohio State, you got to play Michigan, you got to play Michigan State, and then you do yourself no favors when you lose in 9 overtimes to Illinois. So I think part of it too with the contract was you look at the way this program has recruited. It's recruited very well under James Franklin, and a big part of that has been that class that's just enrolled, the Drew Aller class, the Nick Singleton. I mean, your 5-star running back. You've got all this talent, but I go back to, and this is where this year's so critical, until this offensive line gets drastically better, all of this talent is not going to matter. And I think that's kind of what we've seen play out here the last few years, where the improvement up front, you mentioned Phil Troutwine earlier, this is year 3 for him. He's the 3rd offensive line coach since James Franklin got here in 2014. And all these offensive coordinator changes haven't helped this line either. So, at some point, you've got to take a step forward with this offensive line, and it just feels like they're at a tipping point.
What I find really fascinating about the Big Ten East is that you have 4 programs that pay their coach top 15 salaries.
Yeah.
And
it's like the SEC West.
Yes. And like Mel Tucker, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is like the 4th highest paid coach in college football. And I know that James Franklin is somewhere in the top 10, and Jim Harbaugh is either 10 or 11. And there's a lot of money coming out, and Franklin, I think, is 13 or something. And I don't know if those are 100% accurate, but, for the point I'm trying to make, it doesn't matter. I wonder, how does that translate into fan expectations and administrative expectations? You're paying money that other coaches are being paid that are winning national titles, and only one team is going to be emerging from the Big Ten East every year, and you're going to have 3 top 15 paid coaches failing. Yeah, that's right. We got some changes.
All the schedules just disappeared for 2023 from the Big Ten team sites the other day. It may be number 1 versus number 2, which maybe that changes the dynamics a little bit. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, I mean, it should, because you look at it and, you say, okay, if you're Penn State, you could have a good season and you still might be 4th within your own division, right? Yeah. Which is just crazy to wrap your head around the way things.
You could go to the championship game potentially now, as opposed to before.
You don't have to worry about getting past Ohio State every year.
This would be delayed probably.
Yeah, right. You just have to do it in the Big Ten title game. Yeah.
Yes.
But I think that to me is Penn State would be one of the biggest beneficiaries if the Big Ten gets rid of the divisions. I mean, to me, that's a game changer when you look at it. And I should know the number because I wrote it the other day in my State of the Program story, but Penn State is like 7-17 against the Big Ten East superpowers, which I consider, of course, to be Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State. I mean, that's brutal. And now you can say 0-6 of that, of course, came in during the sanction era in 14 and 15, but still 7-11 versus those three programs is a lot. That's a tough pill to swallow. But yeah, they would certainly benefit if the Big Ten would get rid of these divisions. But yeah, I think the expectations for Penn State, and a lot of this, and James Franklin's mentioned it before too, and I think there is truth in this, because of the college football playoff era, success is playoff or bust.
Right.
And, you know, you're no longer happy with the bowl game and wherever it may be. And I think Penn State's kind of fallen into that category quite a bit when you look back at it.
Well, and they've been so close. I mean, you can't be any closer than they were in 2016 and not make it. And then the next couple of years, they were right there. And I think that's part of the frustration. And if you look at what an expanded playoff would look like, when we mocked out the 12 team, you know, using past years, Penn State would have made it like 3 times. And how do we view James Franklin's tenure differently if that were the case?
I think so. I mean, I think you look at that and you say, hey, it's an expanded playoff field, yes, but you get in. I mean, I think it looks a lot differently than you say, okay, I mean, to me, it's crazy to try and wrap your head around where this program was in that Cotton Bowl game. Micah Parsons plays out of his mind. Journey Brown rushes for a gazillion yards. You take that team there to what we've seen the last 2 years, and like, I still don't know what happened. Like, it
feels like the pandemic affected them more than it affected other programs.
Yeah. And it was, to me, like, that's the crazy thing. Cause it's like, you know, and you look at that Fiesta Bowl team that they had, like, again, that was, I mean, by far the best team that they had, even though they lost the Rose Bowl. That 2016 team was clicking at the right time of the year. That was a team that was surging, and then you don't get in the playoff. And that's something that I think that particular selection set this program back for a while, because of course it all impacts recruiting, and they've recruited well, but there's some other guys you're going to probably get, or at least be in the conversation with when you get in the playoff. And that's one of the things that this program right now, you know, you can't sell a national title to any of these players because they weren't alive in the 80s, you know, like, it's just, you don't have that recent success or enough of it to at least appeal to your non-regional kids and some of those types in recruiting.
I think you can make the case that Penn State is the biggest beneficiary of an expanded playoff
in
college football.
Yeah. It's either Penn State or Florida, because I think they both would have made it 3 times, or Wisconsin's in there too, in that mix, but absolutely. And it is a different sell. And people don't think about that just the checking that box. Did you make the playoff? Like, it's a huge thing to sell.
And nothing would change. Literally nothing would have to change.
No, nothing else.
It's the same exact team and the same exact type of seasons. And just the idea that the rules have changed makes you feel better about way things are going, which I think is a good thing for Penn State. At least you can go out and you can feel like you're playing in a game at the end of the year that'll determine the national championship. But I feel like if Penn State just continued and nothing changed there and continued to be who they were and recruited the same way and had a really good team every 3 or 4 years and beats Ohio State or competes with Ohio State, but instead of losing a close game to Ohio State or losing a second game that keeps them out of the playoff, you know, I think that they would make the playoff quite a bit, especially considering the fact that I don't believe that Michigan's going to be a superpower all of a sudden. Like, I think Penn State is the second best program in the Big Ten. And the second best program in the Big Ten makes the playoff a lot.
So Michigan State, we got Mel Tucker on line 3 for Ari.
I mean, am I wrong?
No, you're not.
I think you're right.
So, Audrey, how much relitigating gets done? And we are to blame, I think, for some of this too. Our guy, Dane Brugler, who I love, throwing Will Levis in there as a potential first-round pick. But you look at Will Levis, he goes to Kentucky. Kentucky has a good year. Obviously, he's part of that, but also Wan'Dale Robinson coming in was part of that. The very good offensive line was part of that. But for Penn State fans who think, okay, this could have been the guy starting at Penn State, how much does that get relitigated?
Yeah, there's been quite a bit of that since at least, you know, the draft wrapped up. And I think the other part of that, too, is you look at Penn State's draft, they had 8 players drafted. And so a lot of fans say, well, okay, you went 7-6 and you had the most players drafted in the Big Ten. so that you get part of that. But I think the Levis thing is fascinating because you look at him here, and again, when I say I still can't figure out what in the world happened to this program since that Cotton Bowl game, his usage in 2020 was baffling. I mean, this was a guy they brought in the game for short yardage situations. I mean, I called him a battering ram. He did not throw the ball much. And then he did make one spot start when they benched Sean Clifford, and he didn't look particularly great. So now ultimately will Levis be a first round pick? I don't know. I mean, none of us know at this point, right? But I understand why people see it and see the big arm and all those things. But I go back to, we heard so much about his big arm throughout his recruitment, and then we didn't see it during that 2020 season. And then he gets pulled in the game he starts, and Sean Clifford comes back in, and then Clifford plays really well and keeps his job the rest of that 2020 season, and then nothing has changed since then. So I think right now, though, because Penn State fans have seen a very extended body of work on Sean Clifford, there is the Will Levis intrigue of, hey, what if this guy was here running this offense, which, by the way, he was running a Kirk Shiraka offense, and it's a Mike Yurcich offense now. Right. So you've had some changes. But I do think there is the intrigue just because they've seen the body of work of Sean Clifford, and the way that Outback Bowl performance ended for Clifford did not inspire a lot of confidence from a fan base.
How are we 21 minutes into this podcast without saying Drew Aller?
Because here we are. We're not all recruitniks, Ari.
Oh, no. Audrey's way all over this.
Yeah, I mean, this is your 5-star quarterback, and I think it's like a lot of Penn State fans, this has been the thing for a long time. They say, hey, you haven't gotten a 5-star since. Well, that was Christian Hackenberg, and that was the sanction era, and we all saw how that went. But I think now it's, okay, how soon can you get Drew ready to get on the field? And the way things ended this spring, I mean, he's competing with his classmate Bo Pabula for that number 3 job. So you've got Christian Veilleux ahead of both of those guys. For the time being, now he's only been on campus a few months, Ari. I can see you're starting to foam at the mouth here.
Ari thinks every 5-star quarterback should start immediately, that all the other quarterbacks should be like handed bus tickets so they can go home. How dare you be a 3-star and be here in the presence
got nothing
of
to
this
do with
glorious 5-star.
No, it's not just, it has nothing to do with just ratings. We know who and what Sean Clifford is. And if that's good enough, that's fine. Go ahead, play him and win 9 games or 8 games or whatever.
Yeah.
And fall short in the big one. We know who he is. So I'm always a big fan of turning the page and trying something different. I don't understand the point of going down the same road where you know when that road leads. And I'm not trying to come down on Sean Clifford, but he's not the answer at quarterback. And I think Penn State with an elite level quarterback would have made the playoff at least one time during the Urban Meyer era because they played Ohio State better than anybody. And think about it. Like Trace McSorley, I think, was the best quarterback that they had, right?
Absolutely.
And he was awesome, an awesome college player. But like, can you imagine, Audrey, some of those games that we used to cover together, if Penn State had a 5-star quarterback that actually was a hit on their roster? Like how, like it's possible that Penn State could have had a winning record against Ohio State during those 7 years.
I mean, like McSorley by far exceeded the expectations and was tremendous for this program. But the other part of this that you have to remember is you had Saquon Barkley there. And I think that's the tough thing for Penn State when you say, you had a generational running back on your roster and you still couldn't get in the door to the college football playoff. That's a tough blow. Now, yes, we can all make the argument about 16 that they should have gotten in. But to me, yeah, that's been the big thing is, can you get a 5-star quarterback here and develop that guy to get him ready to go? And then now, do you have the pieces around him? And that's where I still go back to this offensive line, Ari. And I think you can make the argument, unless this line's better, you're going to not help your freshman quarterback out at all if you put him on the field too soon. I mean, I think...
Yeah, I guess there's like balancing blocks there. Yeah, so let Sean Clifford get his head knocked off instead. I mean, that's fine. I mean, I don't know. I'm wrong a lot about that, and I understand that, like, I'm like the guy who drives down the Vegas Strip and goes, look at the lights. I get excited.
It's a coin flip, Ari, or it's a hand of blackjack. There's 49.8% chance you win on the 5-star quarterback.
Because the question is how long does it take rationally for a 5-star quarterback to be ready?
Depends on the quarterback. Depends on the guy. Kyler Murray wasn't ready immediately. Turned out great. There have been other 5-stars. Like Tua was probably ready right away and probably got held.
I just think that the days of it needing 2 years to develop in a program are dead. These guys, like Drew Aller, was like the most polished player at the Elite 11 last year. And I know that's just like a purely physical skill set thing and like reading defenses. And
there's no defensive line coming at him.
No, I know. But there was a defensive line coming at him in his high school tape, and it's like some of the best high school tape I've ever seen in my entire life. And like, I don't know if I subscribe to the idea that Drew would need 2 years of weightlifting, nutrition, and study to be ready to play at a higher level than Sean Clifford.
He might not.
I just don't think there's anything more hopeless in the entire world of being a sports fan than knowing your quarterback isn't good enough to get you where you want to go and entering a season with that being your guy. There's no hope there.
It does feel like I will say, Ari, it does feel like where Penn State is at this year. There's a lot of, but to me, it kind of feels like this is a bridge to maybe better, brighter days in 2023 and beyond, because you've got that 2022 class with Drew Aller in it.
Yeah.
And I think next year at this
the second best class Franklin signed in his entire tenure there.
Well, the good news is
Michael Parsons' class was also 6th nationally.
Yeah.
The good news is no hot seat, no worries about job security for James Franklin. So
would a Penn State fan rather go 8-4 with Sean Clifford as their quarterback, or 7-6, or 500 with Drew Aller as their quarterback?
I think that is a question that has come up a lot, Ari, on the Penn State fan survey that I conducted on The Athletic. I
post on Blue and White Illustrated, by the way. I'm a poster.
The overwhelming majority of people say that Sean Clifford should be the quarterback this year. It was like 60%. However, I think the question you bring up is a valid one. It's one I've thought a lot about. What if Penn State's kind of having a ho-hum season, and here we are in November? Do you turn the page to someone else at that point?
That's probably what's going to happen, right?
Right. Then you start worrying about trajectory, more than record.
Yeah, I think at some point now, the one thing with James Franklin that he's said himself several times is that he's always very loyal to his older guys. And he said sometimes in the past he's been loyal to a fault. And I think you look at kind of, again, the other part a lot of fans, I think, forget about this with Sean Clifford is, yes, Sean wanted to be back, but Penn State wanted him to come back for the 6th year. And that's because they wanted to give Drew more time. And right now, Vayu would be the number 2. But I'm very curious to see what that room looks like in November. And next year at this time, I think we're going to be having a different conversation because you're not going to have all these quarterbacks here next year at this time. If, say, Drew becomes that guy, or maybe Vayu becomes that guy, and then we're maybe having a different conversation.
So, Audrey, let's switch sides of the ball. We all know about Joey Porter Jr., but who else are we going to be talking about on that defense?
Curtis Jacobs, in my mind, is their only proven commodity at linebacker. I mean, he's a guy who I think, and he played more down the stretch. He saw more snaps over the last 7 games that he played last season. But he's a guy who I think has, they always talk about game record potential. He was somebody who was a receiver and a safety in high school. Highly touted guy, Ari. I'm sure you'd probably remember his recruitment, a 4-star guy out of McDonough in Maryland. PJ Muster for the other one, the defensive tackle, coming back off a season-ending knee injury, which is kind of Penn State fans remember that happened in the Iowa game where everything kind of combusted at once. And the loss of Mustafer was really critical when you look at kind of how they played. I mean, the defense played really, really well last year. They certainly did more than their part to keep Penn State in many of these games. But the other guy I will go with is somebody who you guys probably remember, but safety Jair Brown. He had 6 picks last year. And, you get Brown and Mustafer to come back for the extra year, which is huge. So I think you kind of look at those guys and say, okay, you've got a really good safety, you've got a really good corner in Porter. I think their secondary is going to be really good. You've got some questions in front of those guys, though.
I will miss Jaquan Brisker so much.
He was fun.
He was one of my favorite players to watch last year. I love guys that just kind of do everything. So I hope they can find somebody like that who can pull that off. But Audrey, I have something that I've wanted to try with you. You have this beautiful Eastern PA accent.
Oh boy.
And so there's a phrase that I would like to hear you say. I'm just going to text it to you. Just please read it naturally, and let's see how it goes.
Let's see.
Oh, there it is.
Pizza's ready.
Wawa coffee. So when you watch Mayor of Easttown,
Wawa Pez machine right here on my desk.
There you go. Yeah. when you watched Mayor of Easttown, did you feel seen?
I'm a native of Chester County, and that's more of a
Delaware County. Yep.
But yeah, it was hilarious, and that you kind of see so many of the regional takes, and like I know Ari knows this, so you probably do too. But I am a Wawa defender to the nth degree. Living here in Central PA in Sheetz territory, I will defend Wawa.
Wawa is a million times better than Sheetz.
It's one of them is a convenience store. The other one's a gas station. Right? Like to me, it's just not even like they're not even the same thing. But I know I'm going to get Sheetz probably tweeting at me again about not defending
you mean
brand.
Sheetz heads? Is that what they call themselves?
I don't know what they call themselves, but like that's because there has to be some kind of gentleman's agreement that.
Absolutely, because one would just take over. But I will say, so my first exposure to the Pennsylvania convenience store wars was Western PA and Sheetz. So I was like, oh, this is great. And then I get to see Wawa and now because I get to go all around the country, I've been to Buc-ee's, which is better than both.
I'm going to make my Buc-ee's debut.
Buc-ee's is a Walmart, though. I don't even know if Buc-ee's belongs in that conversation.
Aren't they like a different,
It's a Walmart with gas pumps.
Listen, it's just like Nick Saban decided to make Alabama. Buc-ee's decided to make Buc-ee's. It's like that's on Sheetz and Wawa. They could have done that. They chose not to. But
in my 10 years living in Ohio, I've been through Pennsylvania on road trips, both personally and professionally, a million times. I feel like I'm a PA veteran from somebody who's never lived there. And I will say that Sheetz the food is much worse than Wawa's food. It's the same idea, but so like I love pizza, as we all know on this podcast. And I feel like I'd eat any type of pizza, even if it was bad. I got a pizza once at Sheetz that was so remarkably terrible that I rolled my window down after taking one bite, pulled the pizza up with my right hand, and threw it out the window in disgust.
And if Ari thinks that pizza is bad,
and maybe pizza isn't what you're supposed to order at Sheetz, and like I've eaten at Sheetz a million times.
Pizza's not what you should order there.
Yeah, and I've had everything on their menu. I've been there a million times. Landis and I had a rule during road trips where if there was a Sheetz, you had to stop, which was a lot of stopping. But Wawa's food, like their sandwiches and their hot dogs,
Wawa hoagies,
the hoagies, and like even like the chicken bites that they put by the register, the pretzels, everything about Wawa is just superior.
Yeah, the pretzels are a go-to. Pretzels, coffee, hoagies. To me, it's just the Sheetz.
I will say, so as someone who has really come around to the Wawa side since Wawa has invaded my state. Well, Wawa is big into Florida now. So my town, I live in a very small town. It has 3 Wawas, and number 4 and number 5 are currently being built. So peanut butter fudge,
because all the Philly people go down there and retire? Is that what's happening down there?
I just think they realized there wasn't anything like that down here. Now Buc-ee's has moved into Florida too. There's Buc-ee's in Pensacola, and there's Buc-ee's on the other side.
But there's a lot of East Coast, like Philly. There's like Philadelphia pretzel factory. Oh yeah, there's all sorts of.
But there's every manner of East Coaster down here. There's your Philly people, your New York people, your New England people. So they all have their own little pockets. But I think Wawa just saw an opportunity because they're big in Tampa, Orlando, like the I-4 corridor, and then up here in Gainesville. And peanut butter fudge is the coffee of the month. Holy crap. It's like a Reese's peanut butter cup made into coffee.
Have you had
the greatest?
Have you had their everything bagel melts with their Italian bagel melts? I
have not. I've had meatball sub. I've had
Audrey. No,
I haven't been home in a little while. I haven't been home since Christmas, so I'm due for a trip home here in the next week or two. So what are you recommending?
It's a everything bagel that's melted with tomato sauce, cheese, salami, and it's like a pizza. It's a pizza bagel, but it's melted. It's a bagel melt. They have them by the register, or you can make them fresh. Delicious.
Wow.
Wawa's impulse buy strategy is designed to ensnare Ari. It is great. Like the little gooey cakes they have next to the coffee station. I can imagine him like filling up his coffee and then just grabbing 4 of those.
29,000 calories deep before I even check out because you can eat it while you're waiting in line.
You get tasty cakes?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, you got to remember too that I've been on a million road trips with Landis. So like I've been exposed to the Philadelphia, the Pennsylvania. Like I feel like for somebody who's never lived there that I have a very keen understanding of the way things work out there. And every time I go to Florida, I'm eating Wawa for lunch and stuff. Like, I feel like Wawa is like what I do when I'm there.
Yeah, see, Sheets missed an opportunity by not coming down here.
Sheets is trash compared to Wawa. It's like
I had a New Year's Eve dinner from Wawa on one of these bowl trips, and I introduced Grace Rayner to Wawa this past year. We were both in Florida for a recruiting event.
What's your go-to order there?
Any kind of hoagie. It kind of just varies, and then coffee. Definitely the coffee and a pretzel for sure. Now, here's the other thing, and this kind of gets back to Andy's original question. Hers potato chips. I am a Hers potato chip person. Especially their Old Bay chips, which is like a regional thing, more of a Maryland thing. But you can't get those here. Like, I can't get those in State College. So you got to get the Old Bay chips with any kind of hoagie, and then a pretzel and a coffee. And their iced tea is really, really good.
You're not committed enough to get in the car and just go put a bunch of them in your back seat so you never run out? Landis once drove an hour and a half north of Columbus to go to a Philadelphia pretzel factory.
Well, there's a Penn State connection to this. You mentioned the Philly pretzel factory. James Franklin, I believe, was one of his frat brothers. Was like the founder of the Philly pretzel factory. And Franklin had told the story before, but that like this guy with the pretzel factory like believed in him enough, was like, hey, like you could be part of this, right, when it was getting off the ground. But instead, he went into coaching.
He blew it.
Yeah. Isn't that wild?
There's one take that I have that I want to share with you, Audrey, before we go, that I share with Bill, and it makes him crazy.
Oh boy.
And like I'm a fan of the original Philadelphia pretzel, salted or unsalted. I like salted. But I told him once that I prefer Wetzel's pretzels to the Philadelphia pretzels, and I thought he was going to murder me with his bare hands.
This is our conversation the other day, where you're like, yeah, I'd go past the great local place to get Domino's because I just like Domino's.
See, I'm not a big Domino's person, Ari, so that's probably another argument we could have on here. But yeah, you're totally wrong.
Ari's just getting off the
but it's
call
funny,
here.
like it's like Wetzel's pretzels, the way that they like put the butter on there and they melt the pepperonis on there and stuff. It's just good.
But so Wetzel's pretzels, but not Auntie Anne's?
They both get the job done, but I would pick.
So
Wetzel's
basically,
cinnamon sugar pretzel at Auntie Anne's, are you're going to pick against?
I don't ever go sweet with stuff. I never eat sweets like that. I like savory.
I will tell you where the best sweet pretzel is if you're ready to hear it. If you're ready for the information, it's very. This is going to be controversial, but you could go to Auntie Anne's or Wetzel's and get a cinnamon sugar pretzel, and you could pay $3.99 or $5.99 or whatever they charge for it now. The best cinnamon sugar pretzel on earth is at Sam's Club, and it is 99 cents.
You know what? I remember those when I was a kid. That was another thing. Well, it wasn't the same as the Filet Fish Day, Andy, but I remember those. You know, there's a Sam's Club in State College now, so I'm gonna have to check that out.
It's get
in your car and go to Wawa whenever you want it.
I don't know if it compares with Domino's, but it's pretty good for $1.
How far is the nearest Wawa?
The nearest Wawa to me either would be going toward home, which would be going toward Philadelphia, or if you go toward the Poconos. There's no Wawa within like
What's
2 hours.
Time? What,
2 hours.
2 hours?
Yeah.
That's a rookie move if you think that's too far away.
The nearest Wawa to me is 10 minutes. So
that's unbelievable.
I grew up with
right now.
Like 3 Wawas within like a 2-mile radius of my parents' house. And then, you know, it's just, I've got like 3 Sheets probably within 7-8 miles of my
Sheets
house.
has a more expansive menu, but Sheets is lower quality.
Hey, Ari, we all need a place where we can cash our lottery tickets, okay?
Yeah, it's true. Well, no, actually, now you can buy them on the phone, which is another form of gambling that I've introduced into my life.
I was unaware of that.
You can buy lottery, not scratchers. I think you still have to go in to get
if there is a way to gamble, Ari will find it.
I've been gambling on sports cards, the lottery, sport. I mean, it just, whatever. It's the best thing in the world.
Andy, I'm going to come back to you this fall for my Buc-ee's recommendation when I make my first trip.
Buc-ee's has legitimately good barbecue.
I'm just getting the beef jerky there because they're usually around other places with better barbecue. So,
have you ever had like the sandwiches in there?
Yeah,
they have a sliced Italian barbecue sandwich. Or, I mean, a sliced sausage barbecue sandwich. Mm-hmm. That's delicious.
Yeah, it's okay. There are places within several miles of there that are much better. Again, don't just go to Domino's because you can. if there's something better nearby.
Yeah, I don't know when I'm in the middle of the highway. Usually when there's a Buc-ee's, you're just in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. So get some good beef jerky, maybe some frozen yogurt.
The size of the place is the size of a Walmart. It's just beef
Audrey,
jerky.
there's an entire deli. It looks like a deli counter, but it's just beef jerky in 100 different flavors. That's where you're going.
So I am going to eat beef jerky for every meal that I am in Auburn, and that's going to be fine with me. I'm just going to eat a lot of jerky.
Oh, no. I got places for you in Auburn. Oh, my goodness. Don't.
Okay, don't load up on the jerky.
I think there's a Domino's in Auburn.
Yeah, that there is. But no, we'll get you to Acre. We'll get you to the Hound. You'll get a Mama G's sandwich. I mean, you'll do just fine. You're going to enjoy it.
That sounds promising.
Oh yeah, bow and arrow barbecue. It's going to be good. You're going to like it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for a wonderful week here on the Andy Staples Show. Who knows what happens next? Who knows what coaches will pop off? We are taking Memorial Day off, and then we return. We'll be talking a lot of SEC next week because the SEC spring meetings in Destin are happening. I will be there along with Seth Emerson from The Athletic. And oh, by the way, Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban will be stuck in the same room together for 2 days. Can't wait. We'll talk to you soon.